So the first thing I want to emphasize here is that I'm basically oiling up the canvas with a wet acrylic paint. In this case, I'm using Naphthol Red, almost straight out of the tube. I'm just adding a little bit of cadmium yellow there. But the point is, you want some wet paint to paint into. Now I'm going to speed up the film just a little bit. It's getting a little boring. But basically, I just want to cover this with a thin film. Now you can see it's so thin that I can see right through to my drawing. Into this red, I'm adding basically some permanent greens, light and dark. Again, just straight out of the tube, and you can see it's starting to. Here I'm just adjusting with a little bit of a brush up with some sculpting tools. And I cover my sculpting tools with wax. I sometimes work in caustics, and I just let the wax accumulate on there. And now the distant grass I'm going to just leave cool, and as I move forward I'll be adding more greens that are warmer. You can see that green is quite warm. It's got a lot of yellow in it. So I just I want all the colors to kind of blend into each other, and you can get a much more painterly effect this way. A lot of people think that acrylic sometimes seems sort of plastic, or there's something slightly amiss with acrylics, but it's really the fact that they dry so fast that they don't blend on the canvas. One of the things I'm doing, I'm adding obviously some little shadow areas in the grass with some blues, and one of the things that people complain about acrylics is that it does dry so fast. So I've sealed my canvas here with a layer of acrylic varnish, and that's very helpful to prolong drying or slow down drying. So I'm just adding little details, smaller as I get towards the distance. And it's good if you've sketched a lot of fields. That will help you to kind of draw in your detail here. I want a little bit of rhythm going through my field. I don't want it to be static and just have little bits of grass all over here and there. And I want there to be kind of like an undulation of the form, as if there might be a little indent going through that field. So I'm using the sculpting tool again, and I use both sides, and I use a lot of different kinds I'm using kind of the rounded side, not kind of like a spoon, to just kind of press some of the detail. I'm going to paint around a little bit in a little bit more organic way. So it's a lot of fun. And sometimes I just burnish the paint in, rub it in. I'm using some golden liquid acrylics now. I've mixed them up and they're quite thin. I'm basically going to just be drawing in detail. So this piece of tin here had some really pronounced indents in it, so I just kind of want to restate that. And again, this is basically just drawing. If you've sketched a lot, this will be really fun and easy for you. You just add in some detail over the top of the paint. Rub out a little bit with my finger. Typically, I don't like to touch the paint, but acrylics is a little less toxic, but still, I probably shouldn't be doing it. But just trying to firm up some of my edges, restate some of the drawing, add some little smudges and marks here and there. And the paint film here is quite thick, so the paint just lays on top and it dries very slowly. Now, if it were more absorbent, the paint would dry quite fast. So that's one way to kind of slow things down a little bit, is make sure you're painting on a very non-absorbent surface. Now I'm glazing a little bit here, just some water, and then I've mixed up a little bit of zinc white, and I avoid zinc white in oils, but it's not such an issue in acrylics. Zinc white in oils cracks terribly, and you want to avoid that, obviously. So I'm just speeding up things here majorly, just to kind of finish up some detail And I'm kind of restating here and there. I'm adding some color in the shadow. Now here I decided that the distant hills, they just look too flat. So I'm just getting some paint on my palette knife and just kind of scumbling it and pushing the paint around very, in a very dry manner, hitting the tops of the strokes. It's a good way to introduce some texture. And I think it's working more or less. You know, I start smoothing out with the brush and I'm probably losing that texture, but you don't want a lot of texture in the distance, so you do want to modify that somewhat. I decided that it was looking too yellowish. It needed to be a little pinker. You know, for the distance, there wouldn't probably be that much yellow there, so I just mixed up some of my golden acrylic, liquid acrylics, and a little bit of medium, and started just brushing in just a very, very thin film of paint over the top of that distant hill. So it did knock the color down a little bit in value, and it pinked it up quite a bit. Now it's still wet, it's just sitting on top of there. So I can go back into that layer and just paint in with some lighter color to get some highlights. I'm just kind of scumbling a little bit of your glazing a little bit over some of the trees and things to kind of unify the areas just a little bit. Here I am painting into that wet layer with just a little bit of lighter. Now you can see I'm kind of getting back to that yellow, but it's got that pink undertone to it. Scrubbing off some of the paint with a rag. And here's the finished piece.